And we are live. This is the Boxing One podcast. We are back for another episode. We got the Blue Jays Mariners AL Wildcard Series, the Rogers Center. We got our predictions, analysis, and everything you need to know. But first, drop the beat. All right. As always, I'm joined by Azam and Pramit. We're going to be going over the Blue Jays and Mariners wildcard series, as I mentioned on the top. So we got 3 games. If we need that many, Game 1 goes Friday, October 7th at 4:07. Game 2 Saturday, October 8th at 4:07, and then I believe Game 3 if necessary. But we're really hoping that that's not necessary. 2:07, if I'm not mistaken, right, boys?
As it stands now, it's subject to change based on the outcome of the other series. It could get moved to prime time if the other series is wrap up. Well, we hope, and just to add, we hope that it doesn't go to Game 3 because we've won the first 2 and not because Seattle won.
Yeah. Exactly. So, season series went to Seattle. They won 5 of the 7, including a sweep in there. But the last series was, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was in July, and that was still in the Charlie Montoyo days, right?
That was probably the series that solidified the convinced Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro to make the change. The series went from Thursday to Sunday, and there was an off day Monday where the team attended Mark Budzinski's daughter's funeral. They played Tuesday against the Phillies and beat them, and then Montoyo was fired Wednesday morning. So I would suspect that it was the Seattle series that quote unquote clinched it for the front office, and obviously given the funeral and given that it takes a couple of days to get organized, deciding who's going to take over. You bring up Casey Candielli from Buffalo. You got to get a manager for the AAA team, just get all the logistics in order. So I would suspect that it was that series that forced Ross Atkins' hand.
Right. So, and we'll get into the whole, if we get a chance, but we'll get into the Montoyo versus Schneider and if they would have ended up here. But before we get into that stuff, and before we get into the like all the nitty gritty, I prepared a little bit of a fill in the blanks. So I want to start the show with that. Just quick 5 questions. I'm gonna throw it to both of you. You can elaborate if you want. Don't drag it on too much because we want to get to some other stuff. But so my first question in the fill in the blank segment is, if the Blue Jays win, the MVP will be blank. Azam.
I think the bullpen.
Okay. All right. Pramit?
Alek Manoah.
Okay. All right. Number 2, the Mariners player that scares you the most is blank. I think I know the answer to this, but
Okay. Honestly, once again, the Mariners bullpen. It's a pretty decent bullpen.
Pramit?
Julio Rodriguez.
That's who I would have gone with, only because I'm a super casual, and he's the biggest name other than Ray that I know. But I would go with Julio also because he carried my my fantasy team for most of the year. Number 3, the Jays player, and this could be either positive or negative, but the Jays player that scares you the most is blank.
Scares us because he could do damage, or scares us because we're afraid that he's terrible?
Up to you.
I'd say Vladdy.
Scares me because I think he could have a great series. George Springer. That's what they got him for. They got him for October. Scares me because of potential negative outcomes. And I say this because let me preface this by saying I love him, but as great as Bull's been offensively, some of the defensive you are afraid in a close game, could there be a defensive hiccup that it has a material impact?
Concerned about his defense?
Bulls.
Oh, Bose. I heard Springer.
Yes.
Sorry. Missed that. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's what I was hoping for. I'd hope we get a -1 in there. Number 4, to win this series, the Blue Jays need to blank.
Reliable starting pitching first 2 games, both from Manoah and Gosman.
Connected to what Osm says, but I'll be a little bit more specific about the player that scares me more is keep J-Rod off the bases, because he's by far their best offensive player. Yeah. He stole 25 bases. You got to take him. You got to shut him down.
All right, and number 5, and this is our predictions right off the top, just so people who are watching, if they really want to know right away who we're picking. And before I get into this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. But number 5, the blank will win the series, and I'm obviously looking for the team.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Jays, but I'll say in 3 games.
I will. Could come back to bite me. I think the Jays will take both games.
Okay, so 3 for 3. I'm picking the Jays
happy
too.
To be wrong on that one.
Yeah. I'm going to pick the Jays in 2.
I'm going with the Jays.
Jays in 2.
Jays in 2.
Okay.
I have a Thanksgiving dinner on or lunch on Sunday, so I don't want to have to be constantly looking at my phone. I feel like it'll be very rude if I'm constantly, or if I'm watching my phone the entire time. So I'm really hoping for 2.
It's rude lunch to be on a playoff game.
I am hosting some people over for dinner on Sunday, so I don't want to be in a grouchy mood. So I hope Jays can clinch, but I would be happier if they're able to do it in 2. I think it'll probably go down to 3 games though.
Cancel Sunday. Cancel Sunday.
Good team. Of all the games that are being played this weekend, I think the team of all the lower seeded teams that are playing, I think Seattle has the best shot at upsetting Toronto or any team. If you look at all 4 matchups, I think Seattle's in the best position to pull off an quote unquote. I don't know if it's really an upset, but if you want to call it that, but I think they're probably in the best position. And I think even Joe Sheehan, I was listening to him, he mentioned that he expects the same as well.
Even more than Tampa?
Yeah, I think so.
That's one thing I wanted to get into. So we talked about it off the top. The Mariners took the regular season series. Obviously slightly different because you have Montoyo versus Schneider, but the players are largely the same aside from some additions that were made. How much stock do you put in that in the outcome of the regular season games? Like, does that mean anything, or is it just because now it's a short series, you're relying on your best pitchers, it's meaningless at this point?
I think it's somewhat meaningless. I mean, obviously, pretty much every team that gets in is a pretty good team. I mean, you're playing over 162 games. You have to win close to 90 games. And in the case of the Blue Jays, they had to, they ended up winning 92 games and still getting they got into the wild card. Mets, for example, they're a wild card team after 101 wins.
Crazy.
So it's just. So, I mean, you have to be a pretty good team. So I think all bets are off. Short series, you can run into a hot pitcher, and that could be it for you. You can get an early lead. And if you have a lockdown bullpen, you can really shorten the game. Casey did that to great effect in 2015. We saw that. So, I mean, I think regular season record is really meaningless when it comes down to it. I think there are a few things within in playoffs that play up a little bit more than the regular season, and that is having a lockdown bullpen, for example, having the ability to hit sometimes maybe the long ball because it can get you out of a jam pretty fast. If we've seen some of the Jays team in the past relying on long ball. During the regular season, if offense dries up, people do complain, and I mean they would complain even if in the playoffs. If it dries up, but having that ability 1 through 9 gives you that room that with one swing you can get back into the game. So I think certain things play up a little bit more, but it's still a crapshoot sometimes.
Yep. I would agree. And let me just say, it's so Mets. They win 101 games. They have a better season than the Yankees. Yet the Yankees win the division and have a bye weekend, and the Mets have to play in a wild card series where anything can happen. That's just such a Mets thing to happen. Let me say, because that's a stack. That's a sick team that they have over there.
You want a typical Mets thing? They pretty much led the division for all but 10 days of the season, and they still ended up at the wild card spot. They were the top team for pretty much the entire season, and still ended up being wild card. At least they have a much better shot this year, unlike last year when Giants and Dodgers both ended up with 100+ wins, and it was a one and done game, which was really, really unfair for a 100-win team. So at least there's a 3-game series. It's a little bit easier path, especially with the pitching they have. But yeah,
we never talked about this because like we've been on such a long hiatus. What are your thoughts on the expanded playoffs?
I like it. I think it's made September much more interesting. The bye weekend for the top two, I mean, there's a lot of debate about that because baseball, it's not like football where a bye week really matters. Baseball is a routine and rhythm game, so you're almost the teams that come out of this weekend may have an advantage, except for the fact that they don't have their pitching lined up because they've been playing meaningful games throughout the weekend, and the other teams are sitting. I do think that we need to just do away with it. Like, if you win your division, you get in, but that shouldn't necessarily get you a bye necessarily. Like, for example, the Jays have the same record as Cleveland. I think Cleveland would have had the tiebreaker anyways. But I mean, when you're in the AL East, or like even let's just say take the Mets for example, 101 win team should not have to participate in that wild card weekend, and potentially just on bad luck have their season end. I would just rank them by the top two in the league, regardless of if they're a division winner or not, should get through.
Yeah, I agree. And personally, I love the new format. I do get the idea when a lot of traditionalists say that the regular season loses a little bit of meaning because 162 games ought to mean something, which is very, very true. But I think that's an idealistic world, the world we live in. It's either you try for playoffs or you actively tank, and the middle ground has been lost for a very long period of time. So I think this kind of balances this out a little bit. There were more teams in the hunt a lot later. I mean, and it made for some intriguing baseball in September, right? Like even Baltimore that sold at the deadline were in the hunt theoretically up until probably 2 weeks left. That's when they started fading away a little bit, or last 3 weeks. But overall, they had a really good season. So I really love the idea, and more importantly, I love this wild card weekend. I think this is it's a lot like the whole the pick-in tournament that NBA has now, right?
Yeah.
Like the play-in, sorry.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a lot like that. And I think everything's like crazy, 3 days, one city. I think this could generate a lot of buzz. I think if MLB markets this properly, this could be very, very interesting going forward, like the wild card weekend. Four series, 3 games, 4 cities, 3 days, and you're over and done with.
I mean, I think that's the thing, though. We talked about this in the context of like Aaron Judge. It's their ability to market things, and I feel like, I mean, I don't know, but I feel like they might drop the ball on that. But I agree. I totally love this. We talked about this. I think it was maybe the pandemic year. and we said that like it's better when you open it up a little bit because you don't have you have more teams that show more interest. You have more buyers at the deadline, and it just it generates a little bit more interest. The only thing is, comparing it to the NBA play-in, I have issues with the NBA play-in, and not to get into this too much, just because I feel like it's too many teams. But I think in baseball, like it's that you don't run that risk of it being too many teams, because I think it was the playoffs were always a little bit too exclusive.
Yeah, I mean the play-in NBA is because it's diluted. You have too many teams going into the
Yeah.
playoffs anyway, so you could be hypothetically a 400, like a 480, 490, like a sub 500 team or around a 500-ish team, and still make the playoffs. That's a little bit unlikely in NBA. Not that it doesn't happen, but it's somewhat unlikely. But the concept I'm talking about, right? Like in terms of after a 3-game series, you could come out really bloodied and bruised for an ALDS or an NLDS series, and that could create some interesting storylines as well. You can't line up, like you have to put your best starters, right? So
that's a perfect segue. What are the obviously the Jays are going Manoah right off the top, right? We're gonna see Manoah. Who do the Mariners counter with?
Castillo. They announced now Game 1 starter.
Oh, and then I'm assuming Ray Gosman.
I think I would say probably Webb, maybe, or what's the other guy's name? I have a feeling Ray might not pitch. It's a righty-heavy lineup.
George Kirby started Monday, I believe, so he may not
be available. If that's the case, then Ray might start the 3rd game.
I suspect that's how their line. They haven't officially, other than Game 1, they haven't officially announced Game 2 yet. But I suspect that's what's going to happen. I think Ray versus Gosman will be just the hype. The crowd is just going to be. There's basically they got the same contract. I think Ray got $5 million more. The Jays opted for I mean, they made an offer to Ray. I mean, we don't need to get into why Ray didn't come back, although I think it's obvious. It's just going to be pretty. It would be pretty crazy that if those two were to be the ones that match up, considering that they got pretty much the same deal, and the Jays basically signed Gosman to take Ray's spot in the rotation, I think. And especially Ray had an incredible season, won the Cy Young. I think there's still a lot of fan anger because of what happened in his last start. When he gave up with a 2-1 lead, he gave up 3 home runs in an inning to the Yankees that cost them the game and probably cost them a playoff spot last year, or at least game 163 last year. So if you look on Blue Jays Twitter, that's being brought up the last time Robbie Ray pitched on a Rogers Center mound. So I think there's a lot. That's a good story. That's an interesting storyline. That in addition to expansion cousins, as many people forget, the 2 teams came into the league at the same time. Although the Jays got over their drought, they at one time were a team that had a long playoff drought. Seattle had the longest active one up until this year. And I do have to just one more thing correct myself earlier about my talking about how the teams with the top 2 records should have gotten in and the Mets may have gotten screwed. Actually, the Dodgers won 111 games. So even if the top 3 teams, the Mets would have played in the wild card, even if they had
either way. Yeah.
Top 3. So I think that.
And I misspoke. It's not Logan Webb. It's Logan Gilbert. Sorry, but I still feel that he might be a number 2 starter. I think you can make an argument he's been Seattle's best pitcher for the season, and he's earned that opportunity as well. Obviously, they traded for Castillo. Castillo's pretty much come as advertised. He's been there's a reason they're going with him for Game 1. So I think that does come into play. Gilbert has had. I think better peripherals than Ray as well throughout the year. I mean, coming back into Rogers Center, the balls are going to fly. I have a feeling it might be Logan Gilbert Game 2. If it's Ray, it'll be Game 3. Could be wrong.
His last start. I'm checking his game log. His last start. Okay, September 30th. So okay. Yeah. I mean, I think Ray. and we saw this in his Cy Young year with us, he is very homer prone. So I don't know how comfortable Seattle. I think Seattle. See, this is a tough series. These 3-game series are tough to manage for. Like, do you want to hold a guy back for a potential elimination game in ALDS 1, or do you just want to put your top 2, 1-2, just set yourself up for success, and just whatever happens in game 3, you don't
I think you just worry about today.
Yeah.
It's elimination, right?
I agree.
Yeah. So I would say yes, Gilbert would probably you might be right. Gilbert gets game 2. Ray game 3 but Ray pitching game 2 against Gosman would be crazy. But I can understand why Seattle may want to avoid if starting Ray unless they have to, if possible, only because of the fact that he's very homer prone. He's very homer prone against righties, and the Jays have a lot of right-handed power in the lineup. So, and they know him. So I could see why they may want to avoid that if possible. And also just like, you don't need to give the crowd any incentive to go crazy either.
Yeah. I think people just want it for the storyline, because that would be fantastic to
For
have
sure.
Ray Gosman.
Although he did have a pretty good outing against the Jays during that 4-game series. I think it was the Manoah Ray matchup, and I think he ended up, if I remember correctly, pitching well.
He did. Now keep in mind that was probably the Jays' low point of the season too.
Correct.
Like they were just playing their worst baseball. So again, I wouldn't read too much into that series or anything that happened.
How much different is this team really from that team when they were at their low point? And is it just a Schneider thing? I know it's difficult to say.
We don't know what goes on in a clubhouse. We don't know the discussions that happen amongst players and coaches and the managers. So hard to say. I mean, they have played better. How much of that is just regression to the mean and just having them playing better because they were at their... Usually when a manager is fired mid-season, the team is at its worst.
Yeah.
So there's nowhere to go but up. So I think some of it is that. There was all talk about Montoyo and toxic positivity and not necessarily having the tough conversations with players that he needed to have. Whereas at times players expressed more concern than the manager, where players are wondering what's going on, why we're not playing well, we got to get our shit together. Montoyo, well, everything is fine and we'll be fine. And so I suspect that there was that disconnect there. And from everything, I mean, again, we don't know. And obviously with the team playing well, Schneider's probably, the media is putting him on a bit of a pedestal. I mean, the record speaks for itself, but he does appear to be given his just body language and his size, and he's a huge dude, that he's more in command. He's more of a commanding presence, and that may have been what the team needed.
Yeah. So just pivoting back to the specifics of the series and the players and everything, rather than the managers, what is it that has you nervous on the Jays side? What is the one thing that you're looking at? You're just worried that that's what's going to go wrong?
Seattle has a lot of left-handed hitters and switch hitters. Now, if you look at the individual numbers of most of the guys, nothing stands out. So it makes it hard to match up against bullpen, like matching up late in the game when you have all these switch hitters and guys that can hit off both sides of the plate. The Jays don't, other than Meza, they don't have another, unless you go with Kikuchi, you don't have a lockdown lefty in there. So that could be a concern. And Manoah, while early, it's gotten a lot better the second half. Early in the season, he had trouble with left-handed hitters. As the year went on, the changeup got better, the sinker got better. So I think that started to normalize a little bit. So I mean, Manoah destroys right-handed hitters, which kind of fares well for a Julio Rodriguez matchup. But on the flip side, left-handers have a higher likelihood to get him, especially, and they're left-handed hitters. While they're not a high average or on base guys, they have power. So, I mean, it could just, you have one guy gets on base and just player makes good contact in a ballpark where the ball carries, and next thing you know, it's 2-3 runs are on the board. Flip side, Gosman, I think he handles lefties a lot better. So with the splitter, obviously, so that matchup works in our favor a bit more. But I think in general, they're just, because of all the switch hitters and the left-handed, it makes it hard to match up against. And if it's a close game, that will be a challenge.
Osmo, you thinking the same?
I am. I mean, it's a very good offense. I mean, it's a top 10 offense in baseball. They have quite a few good. I mean, good thing from Jay's standpoint is Winker might not be available for the series. But overall, I think that having a lefty-heavy lineup with lots of switch hitter does pose a little bit of a problem for the Jays. My concern, I think, is still the bullpen. I think Seattle has an edge. They've had a better year than the Blue Jays. I mean, their relievers have had a better year. Although I will admit that since the All-Star break, numbers have been fairly identical. And that's more because the Jays bullpen was better rather than Seattle coming down to earth. So I think from that standpoint, I still feel that if they get an early lead, they have a good shot at locking down the game. So I think that is one concern I have. I'm not as concerned about the offense, like the power, because that Jays have power as well. I mean, I'm not really concerned about Jays offense here, right? The starters are pretty comparable as well. So I think it just comes down to the bullpen being slightly better. I think they've had a better year overall as opposed to the Blue Jays. Obviously, Blue Jays have a much improved bullpen. I don't think they've announced the whole team, so I don't know who are going to be the relievers. We know the usual suspects. So we know your top three are Romano, Garcia, Bass, and then you're going to have Meza in there. You're pretty much going to have, I think, Simber. So these are probably your top five guys. And then it comes down to who else is there. But I think that is one area where Seattle has I don't want to say it's a huge delta, but I think Seattle has a slightly better bullpen than the Blue Jays.
So what's the area where the Blue Jays have the decided advantage?
Lineup.
I think lineup 1 to 9.
I mean, Seattle's a top 10 offense. The Jays are a top 2 or 3 offense.
Yeah, so. and it's 1 to 9. It's like, I mean, last year Vlad was second in MVP voting. He had a 6 WAR. This year Vlad's like your 5th best offensive player, maybe, right? Or 4th best. Like, I mean, he's not your number 1-2 guy, and you don't have anyone who stood out as like a 5 or a 6-1 player. But 1 to 9, this lineup has been very deep, like ridiculously deep. Like even guys like Jansen. And I think one thing the Blue Jays have done well, and maybe it's because we follow them more, so we will know about them more a little bit. I think they've put those peripheral guys in a very good position to succeed as well, as best as they can. Like guys like Tapia, I mean, filling in for Gurriel's absence, maneuvering the lineup a little bit, not being afraid to play both catchers at the same time, knowing both are having a good offensive year. So I think 1 to 9, Jays have a clear advantage.
Merrifield has really come on the last few weeks. He's turned his season around, and that's a weapon because he can. I mean, the base running, the base stealing, and I'll add if you want to, and talking about what if I were to pick something that would cause quote unquote fear. Is that Castillo, who's starting game 1, is very good at suppressing home runs. Now, granted, this is an AL East ballpark. It's a little different, but he suppresses home runs. He has a very low line drive rate, and he's very good at suppressing hard contact as well. And he has it's a little higher this year than fly ball rate has been higher this year than it's been in previous years. Again, that could be a byproduct of moving to Seattle and maybe wanting to get weak fly balls in that big outfield. But obviously the Jays have power. They have a lot of power up and down the lineup, and a lot of guys that can hit home runs, and Castillo can counter that pretty well. So game one could be like a 2-1 game either way, which actually, to my earlier point about Merrifield, I mean, it could be the difference between winning and losing is a stolen base.
And I asked this as a, as a casual, as I always say, casual baseball fan. How much of an advantage is it that it's at Rogers Center as opposed to at Safeco? Is there anything to it? Is it over?
I think it plays to Blue Jays' strength, right? I mean, first of all, having the home crowd, we know in the past, being a dome and everything, if it's a closed game, the building shakes. I mean, it's a bit of an out-of-body experience when you have a playoff game. I don't know if it's the right equivalent, but it's a lot like maybe the Seahawks home games. Like you hear a lot about the Seahawks, right? I mean, from that standpoint, I'm sure it's going to help. It can't hurt. But I think the other piece is that the lineup is constructed for Rogers Center.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely plays into the Jays' favor. So I think all of that does help. Offensively, I think one of the areas where Seattle does have a little bit of an edge is probably guys on the base paths. Like they do have some speed. But I think Jays have been better. Merrifield would be a useful weapon. And I think that's why having a deep lineup helps. That, okay, we know Springer's pretty good at leadoff home runs. But the rest of the time, if he's up with men on base, it always helps. And the bottom of the order has definitely played its part. I don't remember. It was a couple of weeks ago or something. I was checking some stats. I'll pull up if I find it. But the 7-9 is a pretty good 7-9 across baseball for the Blue Jays. I think I tweeted like about 2-3 weeks ago. I'll see if I can look for it. But it is the depth of the lineup definitely helps.
So I think I'm looking up Fangraphs right now from August 1st.
Sorry, I just want to cut you off. Sorry, I just found that. So on Tim and Friends, Dan Shulman was talking about Jays getting help from the bottom of the lineup. So I figured I'll look it up. At that point, as of 14th of September, they had the 7-9 for the Jays, had the second best weighted runs created plus across baseball.
Regarding stolen bases, sorry, just to maybe slightly counter your earlier point, since August 1st, Seattle as a team has stolen 30 bases, Toronto 24. So
really,
difference of 6 from over the last 2 up till yesterday from August 1st. So I don't think it's that. I mean, 6 is.
How many of those were Vlad Jr. stolen bases that you want to discount?
Well, I think yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I think Seattle. It's more so. It's Rodriguez.
Yes.
I mean, if I look at the whole season, if you want to go back and look at I think Rodriguez has about 20 something stolen bases and
25.
Yeah, and I'm looking.
Dylan Moore has 21. So it's basically a couple of guys.
Yeah. So, I mean, so they have 83, 25, 40 of the, over 40 of the, almost 50 of them are between 2 guys.
Mm-hmm.
And the Jays as a whole are at 66. Again, some of that was pre-Merrifield. And even remember the first few weeks Merrifield was here, he couldn't get on base, so he couldn't steal bases. And Schneider does tend to be a little more aggressive on the base path than Montoya was. So Seattle has an advantage. I don't think it's as big an advantage as it may appear on paper, as long as you keep J-Rod off the bases.
And that goes back to your earlier point of he's one of the guys that scares you the most.
Oh, yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah. So, which one of you is going to the game? Awesome. Are you both going, or is it just you?
No, something came up, so Bose is going, and then we had a bit of miscommunication. I didn't buy as many tickets, so I thought I'll sacrifice myself. I'm just joking.
something legitimately came up, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I got wild card 1, and then we'll figure out. Knock on wood, if they get through, we'll figure out what happens next.
I mean, I do have games tickets for ALDS, so I'm for sure hoping Blue Jays get that far.
Don't sacrifice yourself again.
No, I
because
wouldn't.
I'm so close
I'll
to the
sacrifice
stadium,
Pramit next time.
because I'm so close to the stadium, I'm wondering if there's going to be any last minute desperate sellers on
100%. 100%
and then
there
I'll
will
just
be.
quickly grab a ticket like a half an hour before first pitch and go. I'll figure that out.
Or to be honest with you, even sometimes after the first pitch.
You can't be late for a playoff game, man.
No, you can't. Yeah, but if you weren't planning on going, just stand outside. My brother used to do this all the time. I know he did it for some pretty big games, but he would go after like kickoff or after opening tip, and they got to get rid of the tickets at some point. So if you weren't planning on going anyways, you're right there. I mean, for God's sakes, you tell us when the horn is going off before we see it on the TV. So, I mean, there's no risk. You might as well just go see if you can get a good deal, swing it, and then
I may
walk
just
into the stadium.
just hover outside and just wait. Hey, Ron, you come down, man. Let's do it. You want to do it?
I have to ask the boss. I'll see if my daughter will let me.
Bring her along, man. We'll get 3.
Oh God, no. Because then what's gonna happen is after the first inning, she's gonna want to leave. This happened to us at a soccer game where 15 minutes in, she wanted to get the hell out of the stadium.
I've been to
I'm not
5
risking
baseball games with my son.
Yeah.
The latest we stayed was 7 innings, but that was the
That's good,
absolute
though.
latest. No,
7 is
usually
good,
it's
though.
3 or 4 innings.
Yeah,
That was the only time.
But those are also summer games, though, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that was it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
can't do that in the playoffs. Well, if I can find somebody who wants to do it, try that along with me. Then I'll, if that doesn't work out, then I'll just walk home or walk to a bar and watch game 2.
I've never felt a playoff atmosphere. I've like for a baseball game. I felt a soccer game. I felt a basketball game. Never felt what it's like at a baseball game. And I could just imagine. Like, to be honest with you, I've never been to Rogers Center when it was like, really an electric crowd.
It's different.
Yeah.
It is. It's incredible.
Like it shakes. It's different.
The most that I've seen there is going to a weekend series against the Yankees when Carlos Delgado was still on the team and they had no chance of doing anything, but the Yankees fans made it somewhat entertaining, which sucks.
This is different.
Yeah.
We've come a long way from those days.
All right, so not to drag this on anymore, but you guys have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to end off with?
Do you guys want to quickly talk about other series or?
So actually, good point. If they get through this, they're playing who?
Houston.
Which, by all accounts, is going to be a tough series.
Yeah, that's going to be a real tough one. I was trying to slice and dice Houston's pitching because they play in a weak division versus AL East. The numbers against top 11 offense is probably better. The pitching stats are better for starters than they are for their own or for the rest of the league against the rest of the league. So I mean, they're a really strong all-round team. So it's going to be a tougher matchup.
Oh, they're insanely good. And I was talking about how, I mean, I may be really getting into the granularity here, but I mean, when you have 3 teams to really beat up on, you're fresh for the top teams.
Yeah.
But they still beat them too. So, like, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the Jays have an under 500 record against teams over 500. But again, a lot of that was they were pretty bad before the Montoyo firing. I mean, the last 2.5 months, they've been very good. So, I mean, you never know. I would just hope that if the Jays get through this weekend, that the bye weekend really impacts Houston's rhythm.
I think it'll be interesting. So. That'll be something that's interesting. Do you, like, I don't know what the answer is, but do you go stale just sitting there for a weekend?
So,
yes.
If you're Houston, do you start Verlander game one or you bring him back to Rogers Center because he's going to throw a no hitter? He's thrown 2 here so far. That's provided if the Jays win.
I think you decide
He owns the Jays.
Young man, you got to start him.
I know. I'm just being facetious. But I was very fortunate enough to witness his second no hitter at Rogers Center.
Did you cheer it?
No, but I stood up before the last out. It's a pretty big deal watching a no hitter. So
yeah. I just don't know if I would clap for it. I don't know if I could do that.
It's okay. The Jays were tanking that year anyways, so it's not like it was consequential.
Yeah, even I remember at a TFC game, Ibrahimovic scoring like an incredible goal and people cheering it, and I can't get down with that.
Just speaking of goals, just on a tangent, that goal from Messi today was insane.
Incredible. He's back to his old self.
Yeah.
Pramit agrees.
Sequence, right, with him and Mbappe and Neymar, it's like it was amazing.
Pramit has no idea, but he completely agrees.
Thumbs up for those listening on Spotify and Apple Music.
So you guys want to make a quick prediction about other series?
Sure.
Yeah.
Rays and Guardians. What do you think?
I'm going Guardians.
Guardians.
Me too. Guardians. Padres or Mets?
Mets.
Padres.
Mets.
Only because I love the uniforms. That's the only reason.
DeGrom and Scherzer?
I don't care. The uniforms.
I think DeGrom is one of the most insane players I've ever seen. Like, I know there are a lot of great baseball players. DeGrom's just insane. Phillies and Cardinals.
Cardinals.
And if you'll notice, I've gone against both NL East teams.
Yes.
There's a reason.
Well, there's a reason for that. Yes,
yeah.
You're a Dolphin fan, so
Marlins.
Oh, sorry, Marlins. Sorry.
Same thing.
Well, you're a Dolphins fan too, right?
I am, and they look good. Just on a side note, Pramit, I don't know if you saw it, but any thoughts on Tua going down 2 weeks ago and then coming back for the when he clearly had a head injury and it was scary.
Didn't the league fire their concussion specialist?
They did. Yeah, they did.
That's at least they should do. that was just I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently there was a lot of things that were missed, and it was clear. Like if you had watched the first game, when he got up and fell back down, like they said it was a back injury, but like you could clearly see it was something with his head, and then the way that his fingers just kind of like stiffened up when he took that hit last week, that was scary. I remember watching it live, and I was like, "There's nobody around me," and I'm just like looking for somebody to talk to about it because it was scary.
Yeah, it was probably one of the scariest things I've ever seen. So
yeah.
Oh my God! Look at this. The Mets considering strategy that may delay DeGrom till the NLDS. Oh, yeah.
That's ballsy.
What? If you start him early in the series, you will get him in the NLDS.
So this is so Mets. This is what
they're insane. Look, we went back earlier. I mean, okay. I like when there was not that big a delta. Okay. There maybe there's something going on because DeGrom's last few starts haven't been DeGrom-esque.
I like that. That sounds good. DeGrom-esque. We should put that on a t-shirt.
He gave up 3 runs against the Braves on the 30th. He gave up 5 runs in 4 innings against Oakland. He gave up 3 runs in 5 against Pittsburgh. And he gave up 3 runs in 6 against the Cubs. So other than 3 of those 4 teams were pretty bad teams. And yeah, he wasn't he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't demolishing teams and dismantling lineups. So maybe there's a health thing going on. He has had injury issues, but
it's possible.
If
but they have they have Scherzer, they have Bassett, Carrasco, Taiwan Walker.
Yeah, but it's
You can change your prediction still.
unless
No,
they
I'll
just
still
want
go
to
with it.
hold him off and they'd start him game 3. So like you could, if you need him, you use him. Otherwise, yeah, you can wait. But I mean, if that dude, if they figured out what's wrong with him, you just he can just go out there and just demolish teams. Like he's ridiculous.
Mhm.
All right, so let's end this off here. We had some good discussion. We'll be back, I think, regardless whether the Jays win or lose. Hopefully, it's a win, and then we'll be right into we'll be running up against the Raptors season 2, so it'll be a perfect time, and then World Cup. So we have a lot of stuff over the next few months that we can get into, and we'll keep a more regular schedule. But before we go, I want to finish off. First, thanks everybody for watching, listening, however you're enjoying our show. And we'll see you again next week. And I'm going to let Charlie take us out of here.
That's pretty awesome.